Hey, welcome to Two Dudes Talking. It's the new name for our show, which we're probably going to rename yet again because
Yeah.
we're working on it. And we're two dudes. I'm a dude. My name is Brian Carter, and this is another dude.
Garrison Win.
That's right. And we are both dudes, as
Is
in
this
we.
the show? Is
This
this
is
the
the
show?
show. The show has
Okay, this is the
begun.
show. Okay, making
Today
sure.
we're going to talk about tips for leadership skills,
Yep.
for improving your leadership skills. So we'll probably talk about leadership skills first, and then we'll give some tips for improving those skills.
Yep.
Before we get into that, is there anything you need to get off your chest? Any rants? Any rants that you
No, no,
have been
no.
thinking about all night, not sleeping?
Is this the show? No,
No.
earlier I talked to financial advisors and then and I thought you were going to say, Garrison, what are financial advisors saying right now? And I was going to say, I can't use that kind of language. So that was my answer to that question.
Well,
That you,
is
that
that
you didn't
because they're
ask.
talking about the economy?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, it was an
Yeah.
interesting show. It was an interesting show. Yeah. Yep.
That's good. Yeah. Well, things are different for everybody. I mean, I should be happier than I am. We've got a couple prospects moving. We got one new pilot starting for the ad agency, right? So things are okay. But and our dog just had surgery. Our dog's gonna be able to run around
Really?
more. Yeah,
So your dog had surgery in any particular area or
had
just
the
a
knee.
general dog
Yeah,
surgery?
our
Okay.
our dogs have bad knees.
Your dogs have bad
My
knees?
knees are fine, but
I mean, were your dogs formerly athletes or something? What dogs? I didn't know that dogs
they
had knee
did.
surgery.
They were in the laser pointer league, and they went nuts in the laser pointer league. They chased that
I'm,
little red dot
what
like
are you
crazy,
talking about?
and
Your dog was in the laser pointer league.
that's right.
First of all, I have to ask a question. Do dogs have knees? I didn't know a dog has a knee. Does a dog
Yeah,
have
they're
a
just
knee?
backwards than
That's
ours,
called
but
an elbow. That is an
yeah.
elbow.
No, it's
That's an
well they
elbow.
have it's one way on the front and the opposite way on the back.
I never really thought about that. I
Yeah,
guess that's
horses are
true.
the same way, and
Yeah,
pretty much
I
most
guess
animals,
I guess
quadrupeds.
to me, an elbow, I mean, knee is a elbow is a backwards knee to me.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Again, the research on that does not exist.
Does not
Um,
exist. I got a lot of research, but not on that. I can tell you
yeah.
right now, there's no research on that. There probably is. I don't have it on
Well, I'm
purpose.
sure I'm sure this is going to help improve leadership skills in some way, but I don't know what.
Well,
So
I
let's.
think that, well, we're going to go there, which is
Yeah.
actually what the show is about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the first thing about leadership skills, I think it's clarity. Are you clear? It doesn't matter how smart you are if no one knows what you're talking about. I think clarity is the first thing
That's
in
an
leadership.
interesting thing. Like we can counterpoint that because I've worked with some leaders who were like so unclear they don't even
Right,
communicate at all, and
right,
and the people under them are forced to just figure stuff out.
right.
And I guess we wouldn't really call that leadership. I guess
No, we would
that's
not call that leadership at all, but I like where you're going.
yes,
So these non-leaders, so
yes,
what do you think? Do you think that the benefit of non-leaders is their people get too thin for themselves and are more creative? Maybe they build a team together because the leader can't do it. I'm not sure where you're going, but it is interesting. Maybe there is something to leaders that back off and let people be creative. I've heard that there's some good leaders that give people space, and that space they give people
yeah.
allows them to be more productive.
I think
So
that's true. Well, I think
yeah,
you think we can take what you said with clarity and you can be clear about a goal
right.
and you don't have to necessarily micromanage the how that the goal is
Yep.
achieved.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that's really true. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot to be said about that.
Yeah, like our website, we got our new website going on, and then the people that are working on our Brian Carter Group website, I don't control. I didn't choose the WordPress theme. I kind of, they came up with a whole concept that they decided that it was going to be superheroes, and I'm like, okay,
Right.
and I decided I'm not gonna like be a perfectionist and say criticize the idea, and they've got me flying around in a cape with
Right.
I think I shouldn't be in wearing underwear on the website, but there we are.
Well, but
But
what is it? If you have a cape and underwear, you're a superhero. Because the truth about a superhero is it's a guy in a cape and underwear.
that's right, and
Eh,
superpowers. So
I've always not really been afraid of superheroes because the chance a guy who's wearing his underwear on the outside of his leotard, it doesn't seem that threatening to me.
Yeah, you better
Yeah.
have a superpower if you're doing that, or else
If you're dressed like that, you better be somebody. Yeah.
you're getting institutionalized. So
Do you think that, I mean, it is a good idea to stand back and
yeah,
let people be creative. It's real easy for a leader to come in and squash creativity. And sometimes your best people, your best performers that have the most talent are the ones that really, I think you can the most easily derail. I think
yeah.
that's true.
It's funny. I think because everybody's got strengths and weaknesses. So kind of knowing where your strength is and your team's strengths are.
Right.
Let's say you're a detail-oriented person, your team's not. Maybe you do
Right.
need to, hold them accountable for details in organization. Or the flip side, maybe you're a big picture person, and they're detail-oriented, and you gotta make sure they know what the big picture is, and they're not getting
Right.
lost in the details.
I
You know,
agree.
yeah,
I've always felt, especially these days with remote, leadership, and I've said this a lot throughout the year on different shows, and I'll repeat it today, and that is that I think people really have to know exactly what a good job looks like.
yeah,
What does a good job look like when it's finished? What does it specifically look like that we can all agree on? And
right.
if you can start there, then you've got something to work with. Then micromanagement sometimes isn't as necessary or feels as necessary when people really know what a good job looks like when it's finished. Yeah.
There's a cool concept in Scrum that goes along with that. That's called acceptance criteria.
Hmm.
And so you give somebody a project, and you
Right.
got to tell them, like, here's what it's got to have in it when it comes back to me. If it doesn't have this, it's not done. It's not acceptable, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And so then, if you learn that process, you'll pretty quickly realize whether you are giving as a leader or whether you as a worker are getting clear acceptance criteria or not.
Right.
You know.
It's interesting about kicking field goals and kicking extra points. It's a weird analogy. Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. It didn't really matter how strong your leg was or even how well you hit the ball or even if you hit the ball in the right place kicking it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kicking in sixth grade and went into junior high and high school and kicked. And what was important, if the ball was not put down straight, if it wasn't laces out, if it wasn't held correctly, right? And if you weren't really focused on looking at the ball, it's real easy to say, I'm looking at the goalpost or I've got this vision forward like I'm trying to aim. And the reality was if you weren't looking at the ball and if the ball wasn't held properly,
Hmm.
you really didn't have a shot. You could do your best and it would have a problem.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's the thing. So you have to kind of really set things up in the beginning. Sometimes it's the way you position something in the beginning that allows all the other elements and all the other processes to actually work. And I think great leaders know that. We can go back in history and look at great leaders, political leaders and those kinds of things. Army people and military people. What did they really do? And one of the things I read about Napoleon always made sure that no matter how many people he had, how big his army was, he always had a couple of side armies that he held back that would come in from left and right
Flanking.
to flank every single time. What was interesting back in those days, if you didn't have enough men, it was assumed you would just come with what you had in some type of desperate attempt to bring the power that you had and make it powerful. Napoleon would come in with half the men and still have the same tactic, and people just couldn't believe he stuck to that, and he was extraordinarily successful with that. So interesting. Just sometimes you have a process that works. You got to follow the process.
Well, one of the things you said that I think is interesting is when you're a leader, not micromanaging. If you have been an expert, you kind of need to take your expert hat off sometimes,
Right.
because
Right.
you have to let the people executing be the experts.
Right. That's exactly right.
And vice versa. If you're a leader and you've never been an expert, you probably shouldn't try
That's it.
to get
That's
into
exactly right. Right.
some of that expert stuff, because
Right.
you can make mistakes. You might say something dumb. There's all kinds of stuff that can happen.
It's funny you say that because I think that I got promoted beyond my abilities years ago. My boss quit and I got his job. And what happened is that I had some people were doing some things that I didn't really know anything about.
Hmm.
And it's one thing to back off and not push when you don't know. But what I did is what I said, which was, if I knew how to do this, if anybody else knew how to do this, you guys wouldn't even be here. So we automatically know your value. We know you know what you're doing. What can we do to support this? What can we do to help you to achieve that goal that you need us to do or think is important before we
Hmm.
decide what that is? We don't know enough about what success looks like, okay, as far as the execution of it. I know what the goal is, and I can help redefine the goal. But as far as getting there, I don't know. You know, how can we support that? And that made a big difference. Just saying that, let them, I guess, just gave them the freedom to do what they need to do to be successful, and know that I wasn't going to try to derail them, or I wasn't in their way.
Right.
And the manager before me, that really was his flaw. He was in their way.
Hmm.
That was the
Hmm.
difference. I wasn't any better than he was or smarter than he was. I just wasn't in the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that can be really demoralizing to a team when, all those normal things. You want to show people they're valued,
Right.
give them positive feedback. Don't ask them to do something ridiculously unreasonable. Make
Right.
sure they understand what the goal and the vision is and why it's important in the context of their lives and the company and the world, all that kind of stuff. So morale is really important. And I
You
think,
just said something, Brian, that is so important.
of course,
And
I
it's not
did.
talked
Yeah.
to, yeah, of
Yeah.
course you did, Brian. But it's not, and it was purely by accident. I'm sure it was totally by accident. The thing is this key. You said this is great. And that is, sometimes we do. Sometimes in our effort to be great leaders and to make things somehow, totally fabulous and fantastic, we want to ask people to do things that are in fact ridiculous, completely ridiculous, And they're ridiculous because we don't really know maybe enough what it feels like to have to do that.
Yeah.
What does it actually feel like to have to what does it feel like day to day to get that done? You come in as a leader and you're really asking them to do something that in fact to them is ridiculous. And that's a problem, a real problem. That demotivates people to no end, is when the
Yeah.
boss says, hey, by the way, while you're doing all this stuff, why don't you do this ridiculous thing along with it?
Let me ask you a crazy question.
Sure.
Well, we talk a lot about micromanaging, but nobody ever thinks they're micromanaging.
Oh, yeah. No.
So how do you know when you're micromanaging?
When you're micromanaging is when you get resistance really before you even start to help.
Hmm.
You're micromanaging is when you start to have the meeting and just the look on people's faces, or when they're saying things like, okay, Garrison, but they keep, if they keep interrupting you before you can finish what you're saying, the feeling they're getting from you is micromanagement. That's what it's what it feels like to be your employee, is
Mm-hmm.
micromanaged. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been in a situation where that happened to me. I've also been in a situation where the boss didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
We had to say, look, we appreciate it, but in order for us to get this done, we can't do these little things along the what you're asking us to do, these little steps. If we have to fill out all these forms and do these steps, we can't get this done on time. So
Yeah.
let's get it done. We'll come back and fill the forms out. Let us get it done on the deadline you want, but let's not put something between us and the deadline.
I'm hearing a dog barking right now, which means that somebody's not leading their dog in the
Well,
right
first
way.
of all, it's not I don't have a dog. So it's either
No,
your dog.
it's in my neighborhood. There's a lot
Well,
of
they've all had surgery. All your dogs had surgery. They're barking from the pain of knee surgery.
it's not my dogs. It's another dog.
Okay.
Uh, anyway,
A poorly managed dog. Go
it
ahead.
is a poorly
A
led dog. But anyway,
badly managed dog.
and that's actually, I've learned a ton about leadership from dogs. Like when I first got dogs, I was afraid to like kind of tell them to do anything. Like I was
Right.
like, kind of sit down if you feel like it, maybe. And
That's how you talk to your dog?
yeah, well, I mean, I was hesitant. I was like, sit. But you really
Right.
have to become authoritative and more confident, even to just order a dog around, and
Right.
and then you learn too, like people want that kind of confidence. Dogs want that kind of confidence.
Right.
They want you to know what you want and all that kind of stuff. But you also need to be a benevolent leader. You need to be
Right.
likable. You need to have their
Right.
best interests in mind. You got to spend some time, scritching them or whatever. Dogs, not people.
You say scritching them?
Scritching. Yeah, give them a little scritch.
I'm not sure what that means. Is
Well,
that
if you
like a
live in the
scratch?
South,
Is
it's
this
like a scratch, but
a
it's
scratch?
in the
Is like
South.
a very micromanaged scritch?
Little
Is that
scritch.
okay?
Little
Okay.
scritch out there.
Well, you said something important, and I do think that it's easy to not be confident, but today there's a different thing happening. Today, what maybe used to be viewed as confidence maybe 20 years ago can be interpreted as arrogance today.
Hmm.
And I think that's something that's changing that people do struggle with, because you want to be confident. But I think if you're talking to people who are maybe younger, that the approach that they've had from leaders, from teachers, from whatever is a little different. And so to say, hey, I know you can do it. I believe in you. I know we can do it. I know we have what it takes. If you're talking too much about your belief in yourself or even your belief in them, I've noticed some young people can kind of put pressure on them in a way they're not used to.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's a new thing, I
it's.
think.
I mean, I work with some millennials in a way where it really helps to, in my experience, not to ever really talk about like authority or seniority
Right,
or position or hierarchy. Uh, they kind of understand if you have more experience than them.
right.
Um, they will or will not respect it depending on who they are.
Exactly right. Yeah.
They'll. I feel like they'll respect what you have to say more if they feel like you respect them and you like them
Right.
and you've been cool and blah blah blah. And so I do a ton of stuff like that I've learned over the years. Um, I guess I've been managing millennials for 10, 12 years. And
Right.
so, like sending them funny gifts, um, making jokes with them, just being part of a team, just being a regular person. I'm kind of constantly trying to shatter the possibility that I might be some old guy. Even though I don't look old,
Right.
I'm
Right.
maybe 10, sometimes 20 years older than these people that I'm
Right.
managing. But I'm just acting like a person with them,
Right. I agree.
you know?
I, I, I think that I've had success with millennials and from a management standpoint, especially over the last few years, just because I think I just generally lack maturity. I think it helps me
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
But the other thing, though, I agree. You have to make sure that it doesn't look like some type of structured hierarchy. And one thing about experience, I've always said this, it's very difficult to respect experience when you don't have any. And
Mm.
I know people don't like when I say that, older people hate when I say that, but it's difficult. I remember I was 27 years old and I was, in a big management position. I had a lot of employees. I had 71 direct reports at corporate. I had all these satellite areas, and I was the guy in charge. And I would be talking to someone and I had a hard time, you know, accepting or respecting their experience when I had not been on their journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I could easily judge what they were saying as keeping it the same, status quo, some kind of weird World War II mindset
Yeah.
back in those days that those guys had. And it wasn't until I got older till I understood, wow, I accepted they had experience, but don't necessarily know that I respected it all the time. And so I'm conscious these days that my experience can be valuable, but I need to break my experience sometimes up in pieces and
Mm-hmm.
kind of dole it out like, here's a helpful dose of this. Not, hey, by the way, I've been there. I know it, So I think I've learned that. But the other thing I think that where this leads me to is actually just having a meeting and what it looks like. In other words, from an implementation standpoint, what does it really look like to have the meeting? And I think there's some basic things to a meeting. And I think the number one thing is to encourage, people to have their own ideas. And,
Yeah.
if you want to increase team performance, discuss their ideas. Tell me what your ideas are, and then let's talk about their ideas. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing is that let them know that all the ideas are welcome. In other words, dumb questions are okay because it lets us know where we are. And that their ideas are welcome. Their ideas are valued, really important. So number one, it's okay to talk about it. Number two, they're valued. But number three is the tough one. And that sometimes you have to provide the justification to why, some of what they have may not be implemented.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people sometimes when you start saying, hey, give us all your ideas, they think they're going to see their idea in the form it was explained or delivered, like implemented in the actions for the company moving forward. And a lot of times you have to take 4 ideas, put them together, and it doesn't look like one of those ideas. It actually just was born of those concepts. Mm-hmm. Some ideas simply create better ideas, or some ideas, kind of like a concept car. Well, we can't make that car, it's too weird. It's a concept car, but we'll make a car like that people are more likely to buy.
Right.
So it's that same idea. These are idea concepts, and we can use them. But I think that's really important. And if you're going to have a meeting, people complain about meetings these days. I think if a leader can keep their meeting short and focus on those 3 things, hey, we're open. Yes, it's valued. But when we go to implementation, understand it may not look exactly like this because it's collective. This is a collective environment. We're putting things together to get that one great movement forward by everybody's contribution. So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And usually in most of the meetings I'm in, there's somebody that's kind of the lead, and it's not always a quote leader, because sometimes it's an agency thing, and there's someone who's sort of the relationship leader for a client or for another agency we're working with, and that person, they may not even be the person who has the most authority of ideas, but they're the ultimate person who is accountable.
Correct.
I don't know and there's these cool things called RACI charts that are like, if you can, for everything, it's like who's responsible, accountable, I forget what the C is. And then
I've seen it,
informed. Yeah. So that way you can have, it's not just one person. It kind of divides out the roles a little bit better.
Right.
So that people aren't trying to do all or nothing with tasks.
And that's another thing. There is the all or nothing can really get you in trouble. It's like, hey, we're going to do every single thing that we've all talked about almost in this order, or we're doing nothing. It's like, we're not doing it this way, forget it. Yeah. And I think that's where you have to kind of be a business Buddhist. And a business Buddhist knows there is a middle way. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can be a business Buddhist and say, hey, there's a middle way.
So many business Buddhists out there, for sure.
There are lots of business Buddhists. I hope there are, because
sometimes there are too many business Buddhists. Those bowls are really annoying. Like when they're just making that sound with those metal bowls. It's hard to work in an office with that many metal bowls.
Well, I went to a Buddhist retreat many years ago. Here's a rabbit hole we should do. And in this we're a couple of rabbits. In this retreat, or at this retreat, they had the bowls and the nice pillows. We got in a room, but I found out in the first 15 minutes that there was a rule. It was no talking the whole weekend. So I lasted I lasted 40 minutes. But anyway, I was literally there for 40 minutes. I had like a quick lunch, and they had a bowl, and I saw a nice, little macrame pillow I sat on, and then I was ready to start talking. So I left. But that was that's my experience. That really actually happened. That actually is a completely 100% true story.
Like you or my wife or her mom, they would be like, they could be like they could do a silent retreat where it's silent for everybody else, because you just close them into a room where they're talking to themselves, but no one can hear them. Right.
Right. There you go. That's the soundproof booth. Remember the soundproof booth?
Yeah. Yeah. What, like, remember it used to exist and it no longer exists?
Well, they used to talk about it back in the years ago. They would we're going to put you in a soundproof booth. Like that was the thing,
Yeah. That might have been a punishment that just your parents did to you.
Yeah, right. You put you in a soundproof booth. That was that. But I think that it is interesting that people can be all or nothing. Yeah. I think, there's a movie with Will Ferrell. What was that movie called? It was called Talladega Nights. Is that it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And his father said, "You're either first or last."
Yeah.
That was, and I think it's easy to get caught up in winners and losers. It's easy to get caught up in first and last. And the world just really never really is divided that way. There's all there's areas and sections and levels. You're not just winning or losing. Sometimes you got to do the middle way because that's all you can do at that moment.
Yeah.
So,
And speaking of which, sometimes when you're dealing with a team or a leader,
right.
you do encounter someone who looks at things that way, like that they
Yep.
have to win all the time.
Right.
And in order to win with that person, you kind of have to take the high road and let them win. And
Yeah.
they think they're winning, and you're just figuring out how to work with that person.
Right.
So
The other thing is that sometimes you can win, but at what cost?
yeah,
And that I've been in situations before where I remember being on a team years ago, and there were 3 or 4 of us. It turns out we were right, and it was the right path, but we needed these people on our side. And I've learned that as a leader too, that I can be right, historically right, lots of evidence. It's been done before. We did it before, it worked. But if me being right is rubbing people the wrong way so much, I have no influence.
right.
I'm not a leader because nobody's going to follow me.
That's right.
And that's an important point. There's leaders and there's people who are just by themselves with no followers. Those are people
That's
who
right.
think they're leaders. Nobody's actually following them.
Those are homeless people.
Right.
Um,
Right. But there's this thing about leadership and management and how it's different. And the truth is they both are the same because you have to have both parts of it. If you are leading people in a direction and you can't manage the activities they have in that direction, you're probably not an effective leader. If you're managing people and able to get people to produce at a certain level, you need to have a direction for them to make that level actually worth something. So I just think that leadership and management are just connected forever. I think those two things, I think you can't really be a great leader unless you're a good manager. It's very difficult to be a good manager unless you've got some good leadership qualities. Yeah.
I agree.
Yep.
Well, so let's recap.
Yep.
Some tips for leadership skills. We've talked about a whole bunch of stuff. Probably forgot most of it, but it was really
Yep.
good, and I'm glad
Yeah.
we were here for it.
It's a good journey. Now, I think better than a recap, I think we could summarize and say that you're going to have to make sure that your team feels like you value their ideas, or you're not going to get a whole lot of ideas.
Right.
I think that it's real easy to get caught up in this idea that that you're going to not value someone's experience, or sometimes it's easy to maybe we're looking at experience too much and not new ideas.
Yeah.
I
I think the theme throughout what we've said really is balance, even though it's not my favorite word.
sure.
That being part of the team, but sometimes hands off.
Right.
Being likable, but also being able to be firm about what needs to happen in deadlines. So there's a lot of types of being able to do both sides of contradictory things that's required for leadership.
Right.
So
That sounds like a middle way. You sound like a business Buddhist. You sound like
what?
a middle way.
Hang on, I'm gonna practice silence.
Let's ready. Here we go. Watch. Okay, that'll probably be the only part we edit. It's just
See, I know you can't do it that long. But like, did it freeze up? What happened? Is my YouTube
well, that's,
working? Wait, get it really really weird.
that's years ago I spoke at a convention and the guy says, "Hey, we're going to take this video and we're going to cut a couple of still shots out of it." And this guy sent me stuff. What do you make of this picture? Like, what are you kidding? Yeah, that's or when were you just kind of going, So yeah, this is we took a really good show and ended it with a bunch of weird faces, and
we always want to end with a whimper, not a bang.
Right. I wanted to make sure though that we hit one point again, and that was just to make sure that in your meeting, as the manager, as you're letting people express themselves and gathering those ideas, that to make sure that it is a collective thing. 10 heads are better than one. and to let people know that the implemented idea may not be exactly what one person said,
Right.
but a collective group will make that happen. Oh,
Right.
there you go. Yeah, now, this, if you want to distance yourself from your people, like how do you go into a meeting and make sure people think that you're aloof? And that is where
Just
aviator
look like you
sunglasses.
might be sleeping a little bit.
Well, it looks like that you're aloof and that it's 1987. Those are the two. That's the two. Yeah, there you go.
I just saw this great
Right.
movie. It's called Top Gun.
Yeah, you just saw it because you're in a time warp. That's why you just saw this movie. I just saw
All
this
right.
great movie.
Well, if you think
Yep.
that's a quality show, subscribe to Two Dudes
Yeah.
Talking.
Just press the subscribe button. You'll be glad you did. Just subscribe. Don't think about it. Don't delay. Just subscribe. Absolutely.
Do it.
Stop it. Stop doing it. Stop making faces, Brian. That's a really weird
That's
face.
the main thing that I make. All right.
And thank you for the feedback and the emails and all that. We really appreciate that.
Yeah.
We are changing the name of the show because it was not a terrible show, but there's another show that's got a similar name.
Yeah.
So
The Not Terrible Show. And then we were like, we need a more original name, like Two Dudes Talking.
right. Two Dudes Talking is interesting, but I'm not sure if that's,
Well, I came up with a really original name. It's
Yeah, that's really good.
but I don't know how to spell it. So